Welcome back to Business Meets Soul, the podcast where we bridge the gap between strategy, spirituality, and energy alignment for soul-led leaders, whether in business, career, or home life. Today's episode is a special one because I get to sit down with someone who has played a huge role in my own understanding of karma. Guy Bennett from the College of Kinesiology. Guy was one of my teachers, and through his wisdom, my knowledge of karma has completely expanded. And what I once saw as just this really simple concept of cause and effect has revealed itself to be so much deeper, something that we carry personally through our own soul's journey and even through our ancestral lineage. And what's even more interesting is that since learning this, I've started seeing karma show up over and over again for my clients in my client sessions. So whether it's business challenges, money blocks, relationships, or self-worth struggles, these karmic imprints are powerful forces shaping our reality until we can actually start to recognize them and start to release them. So I knew I had to dive deep into this conversation with Guy, a guru in many ways who has spent years guiding people in clearing energetic patterns and stepping out of karmic loops. So in this episode, we're going to explore what karma actually is, beyond the basic of this cause and effect definition, the different types of karma, so the personal, the soul, and the ancestral, the karmic imprints and how they actually show up in your life and your business, and the first steps to actually take to start to break free from karmic cycles that no longer serve you. So if you've ever felt like you have been reliving the same struggles over and over again, or like something unseen is holding you back from your next level, this conversation is going to bring some big, big insights. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Business Meets Soul podcast. I'm your host, Tara Hegarty, and on this show, you can expect powerful, soul-shifting conversations to help you effortlessly expand, align your energy, and unlock your infinite potential in life and business. Because your definition of success isn't determined by an endpoint or goal. For you, success is the byproduct of being who you are, doing what you love, and living in alignment with your soul. Are you ready to anchor into deeper layers of abundance, service, and freedom together? Let's dive in.
So, hi Guy, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom about karma with me. What I'd really like to do today is really dive deep into this topic beyond that surface level definition of karma as just this cause and effect. And I'd love to explore the different types of karma and why people sometimes feel like bad things always happen to them. And most importantly, how we can start to free ourselves from karmic cycles so we can move forward with more awareness and alignment. And what's really interesting is that this year actually holds a lot of significance energetically. It's the year of the snake. It's a time of transformation, shedding old layers and really stepping into that new version of ourselves. And I think looking at the number 9 as well, this year is a number 9 in numerology, which represents completion, endings, and the clearing of those karmic cycles. And I feel like it's just the perfect time to have this conversation about karma, what we carry, what we can release, and what we are going to step into. So before we step into all of that, I'd love you just to share a little bit about your journey. What led you to study, teach kinesiology, and what made you feel that karma was such an important part of these studies?
Yeah, thanks, Tara. It's actually my 60th year on planet Earth in this body. So I was born in year of the snake, and it's the year of the snake repeats the astrology repeats every 60 years in Chinese medicine. So the 60th year is quite auspicious. So it's great that we're reflecting on that.
That's amazing.
I know it's hard to believe that I'm 60 this year. So yeah, so I kinesiology was part of a search for me, a search for meaning, purpose. I felt in my life as a young man in my 20s, a meaninglessness in just entering into the corporate world and trying to make a buck and just have a family and build wealth and do what people do. It felt like empty for me after I'd sort of tried it for a little while. And so I guess that was part of my karmic impetus is that, that create, um, I want to create something meaningful to humanity, something meaningful to myself, something meaningful for other individuals who were struggling like I was at that time. And so that led me to explore different types of natural therapies, and I found kinesiology. And kinesiology, to me, seemed to have the most potential out of all of the natural therapies at the time that I'd explored. And I got excited by it, and I could see it was a place where I could drill deeper and find new answers and express my creativity as a healer and a researcher of science and spirituality. So initially, I had no desire to teach kinesiology. But after a while of practicing, a lot of my students were saying, oh, I want to learn what you're doing. I want to learn what you're doing. And so I started to organize other trainers that I thought were pretty good to come and help them learn. And then I started, developing some of my own ideas and then teaching those. And eventually I felt a need to re-systemize the way kinesiology is being taught back then because it was very hodgepodge.
Mm.
And so I started to re-systemize it, and then I started to replace the courses that other people were teaching with what I thought were better courses, easier to understand, easier to grow with. And then eventually I created my own curriculum. And initially, the concept of karma I felt was overwhelming in the sense that who am I to, question the nature of karma? Who am I to profess that I can support people in their karmic journey? But just the nature of working with kinesiology over time and finding the places that it led me caused me to question and the understanding. And so karma to me in a more broader sense became cycles of learning. So it's like often we're exposed to something and we don't really understand it and we have an impression from it, and then that sort of disappears, and then some years later the same scenario reemerges and we have a slightly different experience with the same scenario recreating itself. And I can see that humans are trapped in these cycles that go round and round, and each time we experience that cycle, there's an opportunity to revisit it with a different consciousness, with a different experience of interaction and a different way of engaging it. And it became apparent that the more constructive, the less reactive, the more positive you engaged each of those cycles, there'd be a progression. And as I started to research the different energetic natures of kinesiology, I became aware of like different storage systems for the information and the energy that would try to recreate itself because it was incomplete or required a new experience of engagement of that different piece of information. And then as a way of trying to help people, I sort of developed protocols that related back to what is generally understood as karma.
Mm. And can we start breaking down what actually karma actually means? Because in the Western world, we kind of throw that word around, don't we? It's just like it's like this instant payback, or there's this fatalistic usage that karma was like dropped on you by someone else. But from what I understand, it goes way deeper than that. And, the way that it's explained in Eastern philosophy is probably quite different. Yeah. So can you walk us through that and even just the different feedback systems that you
Mm.
have come across in your research and your studies?
Hmm. Um, the idea of karma came as a great relief for me when I started to understand it. Um, Growing up in a Judeo sort of Christian society, I always struggled with, the inequities that individuals were born into. So some people were born into, a very opportune, loving family with lots of resources, and they had, infinite opportunity to explore life. And then other people born in third world countries and poverty with very few options were kind of railroaded into a very kind of meager existence with very few ways of transcending it. And I felt the pain of that. I really sort of struggled with that Judeo-Christian model where God plonks you here or plonks you there haphazardly. And I've got no idea why he would do it or she would do it. And so once I was sort of introduced with the idea of karma, I went, oh, so it's like based on something that's happened previously that we don't understand. And so all our circumstances are precipitated from different choices, decisions, actions, intentions that we've made historically, and that energy, has been retained from lifetime to lifetime and reconstructs itself in every birth circumstance. And it sets up as a way of balancing the equation. So, if we've created some sort of inequities in the past, we've got an opportunity to pay that inequity back. But more importantly, I think it sets up as an opportunity to grow and evolve spiritually, grow and evolve from the perspective of our consciousness. So we're creating scenarios that in that lifetime give us an opportunity to evolve to the next level and progress that evolution till eventually we're no longer bound by this particular plane.
So, if I'm
So
understanding correctly, sorry to jump in on you, Guy, but so karma just isn't some external force kind of acting upon us. It's actually the residual impact of everything that we do, shaping the reality of our existence. So, every action leaves this energetic footprint. And while we don't have to kind of keep stepping into the same tracks, many of us kind of unknowingly repeat those, or we travel that same terrain over and over again. So it's not randomly like dropped on us by some outside force, and it's not about punishment or fate. It's just this accumulation of our choices, our actions, and our responses. Is that?
yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
good summary.
Yeah.
So it's basically the informational residue of past manifestations of our being that carry forward.
Yeah.
And then we then unpack those in each life that we move into. And then we have opportunities to resolve them, rebalance the equation, and also evolve our consciousness so that we're not engaging in them in the same way.
And so you were talking earlier before we hopped on about this a feedback system and and this relational feedback system. Can you expand a little bit more on that concept to really, I guess,
Sure,
tease out the concept of karma from that analogy that we were talking about earlier?
sure. So one of the thing when we're talking about like spiritual teachers before, and one of the big favorites of spiritual teachers is to talk about meditation, but they also always say observe nature. Be in nature, observe nature, watch nature, learn from nature. And I believe the reason they say that is because the universe is like built as a big kind of fractal array. So everything kind of nests within everything. So like we were talking about the Chinese zodiac before, and that is basically based on the law of five elements, and it reflects the cosmology of the universe. And then the law of five elements also controls how my organs work. It also controls the feng shui of my environment. So it's this principle that that exists within my body, in my home, and within the entire cosmos. And it's the same repeating pattern that nests within itself. So if you can, take the time to look at the simplicity of biological systems, of nature, of the way the world works in its natural form, that can give us clues to how more expanded spiritual concepts could work. So one of the things I've always been interested in, particularly as a kinesiology trainer, is about feedback systems. So the body basically operates and self-regulates through feedback systems. So there's a term that most of us have heard about called homeostasis, and homeostasis is the parameters that the body is able to stay healthy within and function within. And so things like body temperature, pH levels, oxygen saturation, they're all homeostatically regulated through feedback systems. And those feedback systems can be at a biochemical level, so different, chemical reactions happening through enzymes can be self-regulated through feedback systems. So for instance, there's an enzyme called PFK1, which is involved in glycolysis, which is the production of ATP, which is the energy subunit of the body from sugar, from glucose. And so when we have a lot of ATP, which is like energy availability, then the activity of that enzyme slows down. And because that enzyme slows down, then less ATP is produced. The excess ATP is used up. And once it's used up, then the enzyme kicks in again, and then more ATP is produced. So there's just this sort of feedback system between the byproducts of the enzyme slowing down the activity of the enzyme when it's overproduced. And then we have like endocrine feedback systems. So for instance, like the thyroid hormone, T3, when it becomes low, then the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary gland increase the production of TRH and TSH. And then when that TSH hits the thyroid gland, then the T3 rises. But when it gets too high, it tells the TRH slows down, the TSH slows down, and then the T3 production slows down, and then it basically gets used up and drops. And when it gets too low, it switches back on again. So you get this oscillating movement of up and down of different hormones in the body, which keep the body balanced. And then you have neurological feedback loops. So when the nervous system picks up something, it creates a change, and that change then sort of regulates back through the body. And so that's how our autonomic nervous system regulates our digestion and regulates our heart, kidney function, etc. It's all kind of controlled through neurological and endocrine feedback systems. And then we have like ecosystems. So, the body, our bodies live in environments, and we're part of that environment. And our activity feeds back into that environment, and that makes changes in the environment which affects us. So, we can see that with, there's a big interest in climate change. So the activity of humans on the planet has allegedly, changed carbon emissions, which then has allegedly created a heating effect on the planet, which is then potentially changing the environment that we're living in moving into the future. And then there's that classic example of, the Yellowstone National Park, where they eradicated the wolves. And once the apex predator went, then the elk population blew out. They overgrazed and then destroyed the biodiversity, and basically the whole natural environment of Yellowstone National Park fell apart. until they reintroduced the wolf. And once the wolf was reintroduced, then it basically went back into balance again. So we're living in these, complex feedback systems, both within our body, around us, in our environment. And then, a more popular one these days is epigenetics. So epigenetics is where what's going on in our bodies or what's going on in a cell can change the way genes are expressed, which then, helps us to regulate into our environment. So we've got things like, gene silencing, where where a protein's overproduced in a cell, then that might cause the methylation of the promoter region of that cell, which then silences the gene. Then that protein drops, and when that protein drops below a certain level, then potentially that gene can demethylate and then start producing that protein again. So there's this regulation process. And then they've noticed transgenerational epigenetics as well, which is very interesting because that's part of what we're going to be talking about with ancestral karma. So if your parents grew up in a very scarce food environment, that scarcity, biochemical markers from scarcity will be passed on to the offspring and change the way that individual's metabolism works. And that will help them to survive in a scarce environment. But if they actually shift into an abundant environment, it'll actually shorten their lifespan because they'll have metabolic disorders. So everything around us is just operating biologically through feedback systems. And so one way we can look at karma is like an extension of that feedback system. So it's like a spiritual feedback system. So where our actions and activities and intentions will feed back to us and feed back to the environment and the people around us to create a learning experience that can help us to grow and evolve and change destructive behaviors. So if you are operating very selfishly, very consumed in your own needs, not caring for other people, eventually, you won't have any friends and people won't like you or want to hang around you. And then you'll be alone, and then you'll start to think, well, that's my feedback from how I've been operating. And then it gives you the opportunity to, experience the consequences of that and then make new choices about how you operate in the future.
Yeah, that's incredible, Guy. It's a great way to kind of look at it from so many different perspectives, and that's what I love about your work. You're always looking at it from a holographic point of view, you're not looking at it just from one kind of lens. You're kind of looking at it and bringing all different perspectives into that place. And I guess there's so many karmic loops that people can really find themselves in. Whether it is kind of repeating those same relationship dynamics, like, why do I keep attracting the same kind of partner? Or even feel like they're jumping from job to job because they experience that same toxic workplace, for instance, or even just issues with money. It's like when I get money, it slips through my hands and it's gone. And it's like no matter what they do, they keep hitting that same wall over and over again. And is karma something that we can fully move beyond? Or does it always is it always part of our journey, just evolving as we do? Then, as looking at this concept of feedback systems.
Um, so yeah, so when I get when we have a type of action and we feed that action back into our world and our reality, that will feed back to us in different ways. It can feed back, in a direct way in terms of we pissed all these people off and now they're not talking to us and they're making my life difficult in a very kind of matter-of-fact way. But it can also just recreate itself in a more abstract, non-linear way where we seem to be attracting certain scenarios and it doesn't necessarily make sense why this scenario would repeat, but it just repeats. And that's because we're incomplete with something and we're drawing that experience in as an opportunity to learn, grow, heal, and rise above it.
Yeah, that actually
And then
makes a lot of
and
sense, because especially when you look at it, some people obviously keep facing the same struggles over and over again, and it's almost like life is giving those repeated opportunities to expand, to shift, and to break free. But if they don't recognize it, they just keep looping. It's almost like having this elastic consciousness where we're constantly evolving and expanding based on how we handle certain experiences or challenges, for instance.
absolutely, and we have a choice. So if we keep attracting this particular type of person in our life, in a relationship or such like, and we're not enjoying the experience very much, we can look at how someone feels and thinks in response to that. So they might think the universe is against me, God is punishing me because he keeps giving me these drop kicks as a relationship partner, and then feel like victimized by it. But the reality is the universe is, recreating it as an opportunity to learn from it. And so it's a compassionate universe potentially as well, where we're going, the universe cares for you, cares for your journey and trajectory. So here's another opportunity to try and do it differently this time, rather than thinking that, the universe is ganging up on you and picking on you.
Oh, I want to talk about one of my experiences that I had through kinesiology. But first, can we understand some of the different types of karma? I'd love you to break down the different types, because I know they don't all operate in the same way. Can we look at the ancestral karma? And I know how you talk about soul karma, but also the different types, the lower soul karma and the upper soul karma. Can you start to take us through maybe the ancestral karma first and foremost, what it is, and how do we inherit it from our family line?
Sure. So in a sense, there's only one karmic experience, because you're here as an individual colliding with these different experiences as you move through life, and then they're stimulating you in different ways, and you make choices and react favorably or unfavorably to either kind of make it stronger and or free yourself up from it. So in a sense, there's one karmic experience, and it's the soul or the spirit that's growing. But the information that that recreates itself is stored in different areas. So some of it can be stored in our ancestral energy or ancestral memory. Some of it can be stored vibrationally within the soul itself, and some of it can be stored in a term that's sometimes used called the lower soul. So, the ancestral karma is basically, the predispositions that we inherit from our family members. So, and it's important to say that our family lineage is not necessarily connected at all in any way, in a direct sense, to our soul lineage and our soul path. So, every lifetime, it's likely we're going to pop into a different family line. We're not going to basically just be tracking the same family line lifetime after lifetime. But that particular family line that we're choosing in this lifetime could have certain energies and genetic predispositions programmed, and culture from the proximity of our family, programmed into that particular programmed into that lineage for that particular experience in that particular lifetime. And so if you're born with like a genetic defect that limits your health, that could be something that you need to experience in that lifetime, and you chose that particular family with that particular problem for the purpose of experiencing that. But it's so the soul or the spirit, the immortal entity of our being, has a vibrational imprint, and that vibrational imprint will be attracted to certain family lineages, and that it'll go, oh, I like that family lineage. I'm kind of magnetically drawn into that one because it holds aspects of my learning for this lifetime. So I'm getting pulled into this particular one for this lifetime.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it makes sense that we carry energetic imprints from our ancestors, even if we, I guess, not consciously aware of them. And I've definitely seen this show up in my own life and client work, patterns that kind of seem to come out of nowhere. But then as we dig deeper, like we realize that they've kind of been, passed down by generations, or it's part of the learning and the evolution of that person as well. Can we go into then soul karma and your definitions, or your way of sharing more about what lower soul karma is and upper soul
Sure,
karma? Yeah.
sure. So when you're doing like a therapy like kinesiology,
Mm.
and you're having a particular issue in your life, and then it comes up with karma, then we're at a threshold where we can ask, what type of karma is it? Is it a memory from my ancestors, which we're talking about, and then we can actually go back and find a particular ancestor? Or is it a cause and effect issue from a previous lifetime from this particular soul, from the soul being that I am, the entity that I am, which is transcendent of lifetimes? But there's also like a third component, which is like this recycle component, where it's like the lower soul is like an energy sheath that houses the soul, that allows us to slip into a physical body, and those energy sheaths are recycled. And so you could actually be picking up random information in this energy sheath from someone who used it before, and it may not have been formatted correctly, and you've got like residue from it. So that's the third type of karma. And that's the easiest one to clear, because it doesn't really have any purchase on you other than there's something coming through that shouldn't be there. It doesn't actually exert any strong force. It just has to be acknowledged, and you just have to say, basically, my high soul asserts governance over my lower soul, and it basically wipes that issue clean that might be in there.
Oh, that's really interesting. How does it,
So
how does those, how do we know that we do have those, I guess, I like the term recycled karma that you used. So how do we know that we might be having, like, what are some of the signs or symptoms that we might be experiencing? Is it that we're still feeling stuck in relationships or things, or how does that present?
well, well, it can present literally from anything, from a health issue to a circumstantial issue in our life. It doesn't really have any boundaries of
Okay.
how it can impact on us. I was working on Mel, one of my trainers in class, the other day, and she had a health issue, and then basically it was stored in a lower soul, and once we cleared it, then the health issue just disappeared straight away.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. It's
Mm.
amazing. So then can we go into a little bit more about the upper soul karma, and how does upper soul karma
So the upper
come
soul
through?
karma
Mm.
is the big kahuna. It's the
Hmm.
most significant, because that's you. You're your upper soul. Uh it's the immortal aspect of yourself.
Hmm.
So it's the part of you that needs to be growing and evolving, the part of you that needs to be releasing karmic ties so that you can raise your consciousness and enlighten and free yourself from cause and effect ties. So it's like the central focus. So basically, what's in that will attract the lower soul sheath. What's in that will attract the ancestry that you dropped into. So it's basically the predeterminer of the myriad of circumstances that you're exploring in this particular lifetime. And so, in a way, the ancestral karma is a prop for the learning reflection back to the upper soul. And then what's stored in the lower soul is also a prop for the learning experience of the upper soul.
Right. So all three of them start to work simultaneously together in that kind of ecosystem that we were talking about. Yeah.
So the soul, the upper soul has a frequency.
Yeah.
It has like an intent for this lifetime, and then it's basically magnetized to a family line, and it's magnetized to a lower soul as part of the determinants that allow that life to unfold the way it's required in that lifetime.
And does it matter which way we work with that karma, Guy? Like, so if we had, or is it, you know, how you're saying it's the big kahuna and it's the one that kind of attracts everything else? Is it like if we work with the upper soul karma, will that clear any of the lower soul karma or ancestral karma? Or is there like a process of allowing how
So,
that
so,
ecosystem operates together?
so, so in a sense, there's only one karma, and
Yeah.
that's the experience that the upper soul is having in relation to the unfoldment of their life. But there's information storage mechanisms that create the learning experience that soul's attracted to. And so the ancestral karma will bring in certain influences, and then the lower soul residues of information will also bring in certain influences. And it's all basically focused on, the growth and evolution of the upper soul. So from a kinesiology perspective, someone's having an issue, they want to understand it better and release it. The kinesiology will direct them to the one that's relevant for them in that particular circumstance. So it's really circumstance by circumstance, which is the beauty of kinesiology. It's basically addressing whatever's relevant for that person at that particular time in relation to what they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Can we talk a little bit more about soul extensions and soul growth? Like, what are soul extensions and how do they influence our soul growth and development?
Well, that's like the next level of looking at karma. So it's more of a transcendent view of karma, in the sense that so as we move through the levels of consciousness and layers of being, so from a physical perspective, we're trapped in a temporal spatial reality, and that's the physical plane and the physical universe, and then there's the astral plane and the astral realm, which is where we go when we dream. And when we dream, we live in a much more plastic world where things can change and morph a lot quicker and with much more flexibility than in the physical world. And then above that, we have the causal plane. And then above that, we have, the unification with the Godhead. And then that's sometimes referred to as the I am or the Atma. And that's basically the God self within. And so as we attune spiritually, we try to align our lives from that God self within. So it's that part that's unified with source, that is one with the creator, that is the creator, that then becomes the guiding force and directive impetus in our life. Now, from that level, also sometimes referred to as the monad, we're outside of time, we're outside of space as we know it, and we're in this like multiverse reality that's completely transcendent of the limitations that we experience in a day-to-day level as physical beings. So that aspect of ourselves, when it views a past life, it doesn't see it as past because it's not bound by time. It's not bound by space. It's not bound by the limitations that we're bound by. So it's then can be referred to from the perspective of the monad or the I am or the Atma as a soul extension. So it's like an expression of the soul having a different experience, but not outside of a different time. It doesn't see it outside of a different linear time progression. So traditional understandings of past lives and karma is, you have lives as an animal, and then you as animals, and then you get to a more advanced animal like a cow or a dog or something like that. And then once you've had a few lifetimes as an advanced animal, then you progress into a human, and then you're a pretty kind of dopey, messed up human to start with. And then you have experiences, and through the feedback process of those experiences, you become a smarter, more tuned in human. And then so you're kind of evolving, and then eventually, through all those experiences, you become enlightened, and you're no longer bound to the physical plane anymore, and you start journeying through the astral and causal planes. So so that's like a linear view of past lives from this perspective. But if you kind of split from that, and then we're viewing it from the God self, or the I am, or the monad, or the Atma, then when you look down on it, you go, well, these are all happening at the same time. They're not happening in this linear progression. And so it's from that perspective of the monad, we can start to view it as soul extensions. So they're extensions of the one mega soul experience that are happening concurrently, not in a progressive linear format that we would relate to more from this plane.
And so with those soul extensions, and if we clear karma on one of those like lines, say a past life and everything, are we clearing that karma from all of the parts of the soul that's having those different experiences, or those soul extensions?
Well, so if from a past life experience, so if I did something dodgy in my past life,
Yeah.
and then the circumstances recreated in this life, and then I would then go, okay, well, I have sort of feedback from that dodgy experience in that past life in this life, and I've got to try and deal constructively with it so that I'm dismantling it rather than carrying it forward into the life after that and the life after that. So that would be a way you could look at it from, a traditional linear past life karmic model moving forward.
Yeah.
But from a soul extension model, what you'd look at is that this life and this life, as different soul extensions, have like a energy cord connecting to them, and there's like psychic feedback going back and forth across time and location to these two lives. And what happened in this life is impacting on this life through that cord. So from a soul extension perspective, the solution for that is to re-reference back to the I am, rather than try and improve what happened in the previous life relative to the life you're in now.
Yeah.
And so then that becomes more all my soul extensions are referenced back to the I am. So once they're all connecting back to the I am, they're all kind of vertically integrating into the I am. The dysfunction between the lives starts to break down, and then they start to resonantly support each other as expressions of self-mastery.
Incredible. Yeah, I'm following. That's amazing. It was actually interesting. I want to share a story around the karma that I had cleared. And it was through kinesiology that I uncovered and released a karmic imprint around control, particularly control in relationships that had been playing out in my relationship dynamics for 8,000 lifetimes. And
Wow.
honestly, when it came up and I released it, 2 weeks later, it shook everything up in my relationship with my husband. I reached a point where I was ready to walk away from him, and I didn't actually realize how deeply ingrained this pattern was until it obviously surfaced. But it's fascinating how sometimes we can sense we're in this loop, and other times we can be completely blind to it. And for me, it was unconscious, but now moving through all of that and looking back, it was clearly delaying my personal growth, my soul growth, in the relationship. And it was like this shakeup that we needed in our dynamic. And while we've mended things now, it really took a toll on us. And I know many of us have these experiences in our life that changes, the direction of where we go, and whether, we either move through it or bring more awareness to it. And even that, I created this, or do I just ignore it? So yeah, I find it really interesting how karma can, start once you start to clear it, how it can shift and shape. Because now our relationship, it's in a completely different level, and we're able to kind of evolve spiritually together. So where it was kind of just comfortable and easygoing, it's taken this whole next kind of, I want to say, quantum leap into where we needed to go as two souls on a journey as well. And I'm sure you have lots of stories, and I'd love to hear what's one of the biggest karmic lessons that you've moved through.
Gosh. Um,
Big question, I know, isn't it?
yeah. Well, yeah. It's not one that I've sort of reflected on, but it's interesting. My mother passed away last year at 90 um 93, and
Oh, I'm so sorry. I met your
yeah,
mum too. I
yeah,
didn't
she
realize
came to
she
the class once,
passed.
didn't she?
She did. Yeah, she's a beautiful lady. You're looking after
Yeah,
her. Yeah.
yeah. And at her ceremony, I found out from one of my cousins that uh, my father was a Mossad agent in the 1950s. So he was working for the Israeli Secret Service. Um, and um, and then that made a lot of sense to me, because he was a very strong-willed, aggressive man that could sort of push his way through any sort of circumstance.
Mm.
And it was really interesting because I sort of grew up in that, but didn't know that that was his history. And I always felt this sort of um, like aggression and forcefulness that was part of my family culture. But then at a spiritual level, I always felt very soft and gentle and loving and caring. And so I had these two very strong dichotomies, and they would always be acting out and creating, polarized contrast, uh, particularly affecting my relationships, more than anything.
Mm.
And in my this relationship with Bethany, um, and it's completely disappeared,
Mm.
and I feel like those two parts of me have like resolved and don't impact on each other anymore. But it was really interesting, just that little piece of information, finding out the history of my father,
Mm.
and not ever being told that.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
really bizarre.
yeah,
But
that's big.
and I can see how the shadow of that, of my ancestral karma,
Mm.
of what he was bringing through, was always at loggerheads with what my spiritual nature was about.
Mm. Hmm.
But
It's a,
yeah, I feel like it's really resolved just through time and cycling through things.
yeah. And it's that cycling of awareness, isn't it? It's that stretching open, and I really feel that kinesiology does really deeply support clearing a lot of that karmic residue. And I know the process, is so effective, and I use it, so much in
Mm.
my practice, and I can't thank you enough, because that's how we break free from those karmic cycles. Obviously, we can it holds in our systems and we may not be aware of it, but the body holds the answer, and kinesiology can definitely help move through that. So, Guy, is there anything you would like to say that we haven't touched on? Like anything you'd like to close out on at all?
Yeah, I'd like to just um, look at the concept of, thought uh, and consciousness as like a creative force,
Hmm.
and it kind of explains how we can get trapped in loops, but also explains how we can step out of loops. So more and more science, spirituality, it's all coming to the same junction point where we're basically we're basically we're basically living in a virtual reality of consciousness. And so the mind is the creative force that creates all our experiences. So karma is like self-perpetuating in the sense that if I believe something, I'll create it, and then that will reinforce it.
Mm.
And so when I come to re-experience the residue of that belief system recreating itself, part of me can go, see, I was right. I believe this, and now I've proved it. And so then by its own nature, it becomes self-validating. And through repeating the experience, you also like build a neural network that then supports that creation. So, um, so I like to see us as creator beings, and we've created a particular reality, and then that reality then recreates itself because we've created I guess the neurological pathways and the energy pathways to then roll forward the manifestation of it. So and so then accessing our creative potential to make new choices about how we want to redesign our reality is really important. So when people find themselves in loops, probably the most important thing to do is, firstly be aware of the loop. The second thing is always try to be as constructive as possible. So when we, get upset that it's happening again, we get upset because it's not going the way we want it to go, and then we start reacting to the fact that we're upset, then that's usually when we start to reinforce the karma, because we're not looking at the problem as it stands and trying to create like a constructive pathway to move out of it.
Mm.
And so in the same way that there's a groove in the energy matrix and the neurological matrix, we've got to then, have the presence to then continue to make new choices and continue to make new actions that basically pull us out of it. And so, the ability to meditate and to witness things and not react to things brings us to the point where we can also make constructive choices. And so with each, positive choice we make in the face of the momentum of the past, we create an impetus towards a new direction, and we partially dismantle the momentum of the old direction.
Mm.
So and this is basic spiritual philosophy, and but it's also really important to remember this, with like a new age technique like kinesiology, because when you're doing kinesiology, you're dismantling causal elements, which does free you up and allows you to make new choices, but you still need to have that presence of mind and constructiveness to pull yourself out, and as on top of the fact that you have this, tools for dismantling the entanglements.
I like it. It's like, karma. My life is my making. It's like releasing, and that or really kind of tuning into that intrinsic intelligence that karma is your life, through that action. And because of it, it is your karma. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then,
Yeah.
and like Joe Dispenza says with, brain plasticity, unless you do something different to what you've done previously,
Mm.
you will just reinforce what you've done previously.
Mm.
So, and then having the presence of mind to be able to do that, whatever can bring you to that presence of mind to be able to do that, I think is really important.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's, I guess, where practices come in.
Yeah.
And so when you combine the practices with a tool like kinesiology, you can really accelerate your potential in this lifetime.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, Guy, this conversation has been incredibly insightful. I love how you've helped us really unpack karma in a way that's really practical and empowering rather than just this kind of mystical notion. So, for those who are listening and want to dive deeper into clearing karmic imprints and stepping into their full potential, you can learn under Guy's teachings at the College of Kinesiology. They have 2 intakes throughout the year, one at the beginning, and they take mid-year intakes as well. And if you're a little curious, you can experience the magic of kinesiology through their road test weekends that they have too. I'll put the links into the show notes for you all. Thank you so very much, Guy, for sharing your wisdom today. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's been great. It's
And
nice to be here again.
Yeah, thank you so very much for coming back on the show. I really appreciate your teachings and your wisdom. It's a real honor to connect with you again. So, and to everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and just share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you next time on Business Meets Soul.
Thanks, Tara.
All right, friends, that concludes today's conversation. If it lifted your spirit or touched your soul, it would mean the absolute world to me if you could leave a review and subscribe to this podcast so that more souls can be impacted by these life-changing conversations. And if you're not ready for this episode to end, head over to tarahegarty.com to get the show notes for today's episode. I love you so much and thank you for being here. I'll see you next week for another episode of Business Meets Soul.